Yes, Chair, we're live now, so you can start the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning and welcome to the Overview and Scrutiny 1 Committee. All participants are taking part remotely and we are live streaming to YouTube. There will now be a roll call for confirmation that members of the committee are present. You could do the roll call, please, Trish.
Yep, thank you. Councillor Clarence.
Present.
Councillor D. Cox.
Present.
Councillor Foden.
Present.
Councillor Hocking.
Present.
Councillor Nutley.
Present.
Councillor Patch.
Present.
Councillor Rollison.
Present.
Councillor Thorne.
Present.
Councillor Jenks.
Present.
Yourself, Chair.
Present.
And then I have apologies from Councillor Eden, Councillor Gribble, and Councillor Malone isn't present, I don't think. Is Councillor Malone here? No. Okay, that's fine. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Right, so the announcements. Please make sure all microphones are muted when you're not speaking to avoid any background noise levels. Please keep your points short and do not interrupt when someone is speaking. If you wish to comment, please raise your electronic hand and wait to be called. When it comes to a vote, if we are to roll call, the Democratic Services Officer will read out members' names. Would members please say if they're voting for, against, or abstaining? Alternatively, the vote will be taken by a show of hands. We will look to have a break at a convenient time, some 90 minutes into the meeting if required. If members lose internet connection, the meeting will be paused for a few minutes to allow members to rejoin. Moving on to the agenda item 1. Are there any apologies, please, Trish?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Apologies from Councillor Eden, Gribble, and Malone's not present. Thank you.
Thank you. Agenda item 2.
Sorry, I am present. I'm right here.
Oh, sorry. Thank you.
Sorry, I'm late.
2, the minutes of the last meeting. I'm quite happy with them. I propose to accept them. If I could have a seconder or any comments. Thank you.
To second that, Chair.
Thank you. Anyone disagree with that? Could we do that on a show of hands rather than a roll call, please?
That's fine, Chairs. Are there any against? And any abstentions? That's carried, Chair.
Thank you. Item 3, are there any declarations of interest, please? Don't think so. Right, item 4, are there any public questions, please? Trish?
No public, Chair.
No.
Public questions, Chair. Thank you.
And are there any councillor questions?
No.
No. Okay, lovely. Item 6, executive forward plan. I think we just need to note that unless there's any comments on that one. No, I don't think so. Can't.
Yes, thanks, Chair. That's just to note the
Yeah.
executive forward plan is available through the link in the agenda.
Yeah, okay. Item 7, work programme. Again, just like to note that, I believe, unless there's any comments on that. No. Okay, noted. Item 8, connecting Devon and Somerset scheme. Welcome to Matt Barrow from Devon County Council, who will update us on the committee and answer questions in conjunction with Neil Blaney, Head of Place and Commercial Services, and Councillor Martin Wrigley, Executive Member. Yep, carry on with it. Cheers.
Lovely, thank you, Chair. Neil, Charles, I assume you're happy if I take the lead initially. Okay, great. So just have slideshow, which I'd like to run through, really essentially bringing up to speed and looking at forward plans over the next couple of years. Forgive me, I didn't introduce myself. My name's Matt Barrow. I am the Stakeholder Engagement Officer for Connecting Devon and Somerset. So it's my role to work with individuals, communities, parishes, councillors at a district and county level, as well as constituency offices, and act as the link between the programme and the communities that we serve. Forgive me, for some of you will be familiar with some of this background, but I think it is important just to provide a context going forward. I'll try and be concise, but as colleagues who do know me will know that brevity is perhaps not my strong suit. I'll be as quick as I can. So essentially, Connecting Devon and Somerset, we're a partnership programme, partnership of local authorities, the LEP and national government, and we exist to deliver the government's superfast agenda. So we are about raising speeds across the CDS region, which encompasses the geographies of Devon and Somerset as county councils, as well as the unitaries to the north, and we're about bringing people up to at least speeds of 30 meg per second. That's the definition of superfast. And sorry, I thought my slides had stopped working. And the objectives are fairly clear. We are about business support, we're about community support, as well as the transformation of the public sector. And critically, we operate in those areas where there is deemed to be market failure. So essentially, we talk to industry and we identify where it is they believe is commercial for them to roll out connectivity across the region, and where they are going commercially, we do not go. This is about state aid clearance and ensuring the best use of the public purse. Essentially, by and large, what that means around economies of scale is that we operate in the rural parts of the CDS region, and industry will commercially deliver into the more urban parts. So the definition of commercial failure is a double-edged sword. On the one hand, it would mean that essentially industry would not be going to those more rural parts, but it does then give us state aid clearance to allow us to intervene and pay industry to go to those places that they deem not to be commercially viable. We operate in phases. Our phase one was delivered exclusively, and indeed nationally was delivered exclusively with BT, and the overall budget is a combination of public sector funding and the monies contributed to contracts by industry, you can see it was 94 million. We are now operating within phase two, and that combined total is around 78 million. So essentially, the first phase contract was delivered, as I say, nationally by BT, I think exclusively. And our phase two, I'm not glossing over the fact, many of you will be familiar that our first contracts for phase two were originally let with a company called GigaClear, and I will come on to that. So this bullet point doesn't address that, but as I say, I'm not glossing over it. But we recently announced just before Christmas, about as close to Christmas as you can possibly get, that we had relet those contracts over the region with 3 firms: Airband, Wessex Internet and TrueSpeed. So under phase one, we delivered as the state-funded element, approximately 300,000 premises, of which 270 odd at the time of contract closure were delivered at a superfast speed. The remaining 30,000 had a significant uplift, but they didn't quite hit that superfast definition. So it was a significant benefit, but it was perhaps an unintended consequence. It was a bonus, if you like. We then let some of our phase two money early in a contract to deliver into the 2 moors, and that was essentially because we'd identified in discussion with industry that whatever we did with our phase two contracts, given that they weren't going to cover the totality of the region, it became pretty obvious where was going to be the last place that our contractors were likely to go. So we decided to bite the bullet and address those first, and we delivered over 5,000 properties in and around Dartmoor and Exmoor. We ran our own voucher scheme, which was an interim measure and was around getting people who suffered the absolute slowest speed some kind of interim uplift and relief on their speeds, predominantly delivered through 4G technology. And the bullet says 1,300 installations. I think we ended up probably delivering closer to 1,600 or so. And then under phase 2, of the 6 lots that we let, 5 were let with GigaClear, 1 was let with Airband, and that was the lot 4 area. And this is will be significant as we go on, but essentially that was for North Devon, Torridge and West Devon, with some 13 to 14,000 properties delivered. Initially using superfast wireless as a rapid deployment methodology, but within the contract, Airband approached us after about a year's operation. They, as a company, were moving more into fibre, and the latter part of that contract will be delivered using fibre. And it's important to emphasise that, because we spent quite a lot of time working with Airband on the Moors contract, explaining to people the benefit of fixed wireless, and I think perhaps we've almost made a rod for our own back in associating Airband's name with wireless deployment. Wireless is an excellent technology, but the new contracts will all actually be fibre. In parallel, we worked with GigaClear for a period of time, but ultimately those contracts were not successful, and they were cancelled in September of 2019. So we then had to go through a process of re-procuring those. It is a long process. It's not one that you can take any shortcuts over, but I'll take you through that. But on the 23rd of December last year, we were successful in signing 6 contracts, including the Lot F contract, which impacts on Tinbridge, and that was that was awarded to Airband. So looking at the coverage that impacts on the district, the first phase operating with BT used the technology called fibre to the cabinet, where essentially we were building out from their existing infrastructure. Fibre to the cabinet's in some respects a self-explanatory term. You run fibre to the existing green roadside boxes, you erect another box, you tie the two together, but the last journey of the delivery of broadband runs on the existing copper wires. So this is it's an excellent technology in urban areas. If you have 400 properties connected to a green box and you enable that for fibre, 400 properties get access to superfast. As a technology, it will deliver up to 80 meg per second. But copper being a metal having resistance, speed attenuates over distance. So the easiest way of thinking of it is if you're within approximately 1.2 kilometers of a green box and you're attached by copper, you will get a super fast speed. If you're next to the box, you'll get 80, and as you get further out, your speed drops. Round about 1.2 kilometre, it drops below that super fast mark. So essentially with BT, we didn't pay them once the speed had dropped below super fast speed. However, between 1.2 and 1.8 kilometres, you still can get a significant improvement over your existing standard copper speed. So you might go from 5 meg to 18. So there's a lot of benefit, and what this diagram shows, and the mapping on this program is always slightly tricky, but the heat map areas, the green inner circles represent the 1.2 kilometre radius, and then the purple fringes represent the 1.2 to 1.8. So that's where the coverage mainly impacted under phase 1. You then saw some benefit coming in from the Moorland contract with Airband, and this kind of represents the coverage patterns that they were then able to introduce and increase coverage within the district using predominantly fixed wireless at this point. So if you look between the two, there are kind of two sides of the coin, if you like. Just briefly on the GigaClear contracts, we originally let those at the tail end of 2016, and they were due to run 17, 18 and 2019 with a target of around 41,000 premises across the region. And they were beset with a number of difficulties. In 2018, GigaClear identified that they were struggling and provided us with information on some of those issues, which we worked together with them on, and to be fair, had been working with them on some of these issues prior to that point. And they revolved around a number of things. They were impacted by the collapse of Carillion Talent, who were their tier 1 subcontractor and slated to deliver the vast majority of their build. Obviously, with that company going under, there was then a period of uncertainty. Talent stepped into the breach under a kind of joint user agreement between Carillion and Talent, but that was a significant impact. There were also issues around designs which didn't really scale from where they'd operated in other parts of the country, and they didn't really mesh particularly with Southwest geographies. They did introduce significant additional funding. They were bought out by a venture capital firm, Infracapital, who introduced more funding into the program, and they significantly increased their regional capacity, both within the team and their subcontractors, but all of this took time and impacted on their ability to deliver. They revised their plans on a number of occasions, and that is a formal process within the contract. So they had remedial plans, several reiterations of those, but ultimately they were unsuccessful. So the contracts were terminated in September of 2019, and we began the arduous route of replacing those. And it's never as simple as just going to somebody else. And we did have to, under our state aid terms, have to go back out to a full procurement. So the procurement ran along these lines. There were decisions that needed to be taken as to what kind of procurement, and we did have a number of different routes. So we discussed those and took legal advice and advice from our funders, etc., during the early part of 2020, and then embarked upon the chosen procurement route, which I mean, I won't take you through, but you can see that there are stages which involve engaging with industry, getting an idea of their aspirations, their appetite, and their capacity, then inviting them to complete an initial tender approach, which introduces a quality threshold and bar. Those potential bidders who met that bar were then invited to formally tender. That then takes you through an additional process of evaluation and scrutiny of their technical approach, their financial approach, their legislative approach, and all that kind of stuff. And then they had to be assured, and that was a joint effort between the CDS team and the team at the Department of Culture, Media and Sport, BD UK. And ultimately, we were successful in signing all of those contracts. There was a degree of pressure because we had a state aid regime that was closing on the 31st of December. So had we not let the contracts before that point, it would not have been possible to let them in January. It was a go or no go situation. So there was an awful lot of relief around December. So for the next stages, having let the contracts, it kind of breaks down into 5 clear stages, I think. There's the initial mobilization where offices are established, staff are the teams, they have all of these people have a core team in place to deliver, but they need to expand that. So they're finalizing recruitment, they're finalizing the initial design. So to actually bid for these contracts, there needs to be a basis for design and how the rollout will happen. Those designs need to be firmed up. So it's a firming up and getting ready period. Following that, they need to survey and design, and strictly speaking, it's probably more design, survey and design. So the designs need to be firmed up, and then the assumptions within those designs need to be tested, and that involves going out and surveying within communities, checking that those things that they think are there are actually there, finding unpleasant surprises, rivers that aren't marked on maps, engineering difficulties and the like. Those form the basis of survey packs, which are passed back into the team, and the designs are then finalized. Having done that, there's then a phase where all of the requirements of those designs are then planned. So highways notices, or permits rather, need to be submitted. The wayleaves that have been identified within the surveying process need to be acquired. The communities need to be engaged and told what is about to happen, and subcontractors need to be scheduled, and the build needs to be planned in line with all of that work. Then there's the build phase. That's the bit where you actually see boots on the ground with people stringing fibre, clearing out ducts, desilting, replacing telegraph poles, cutting back trees, etc. And then the final go live phase on a sub-regional structure basis. Our contractors tell us that an area is ready to go. We go out and do technical assurance, check that they have delivered to the premises that they said they would deliver to, using the right equipment, that it's what's called NGA white compatible, that it's actually appropriate equipment. Meanwhile, they are testing, they're making sure that all of their fibre splicing, etc., is ready to go. And then the community is notified and people can place orders. So the coverage overall, if you look, you'll see the purple shaded area covers Lot F. It's a massive geography for Airband to cover, but they are enthusiastic and optimistic, and that work will proceed once that initial gearing up phase is over, and we will work with them to engage with parish councils and communities to inform them about the first thing that they will see, which will be people walking their routes, walking their lanes, and doing the survey piece. We've done quite a lot of this over the last 12 months on other parallel contracts where we're working with both Openreach and Airband in other parts of the region, and we're acutely aware of the need to engage with communities to explain that surveying as a process is COVID safe, that colleagues doing that will actually observe all the appropriate social distancing, and are very alive to people walking into their communities and any concerns that may bring. The confidence that we have within our new suppliers are based on a number of the points which are kind of called out here, and there are perhaps differences with previous contracts, but we have particular confidence in these companies for these reasons. They're not Openreach, and there is always a tendency for one to kind of compare with what we have known for generations as the kind of incumbent telco. But the market is increasingly a competitive space, and there are large numbers of what are called altnets, smaller suppliers who are still delivering at scale and have been doing this for some time. So each of our three contractors have been around for about a decade. They either are based within the CDS region nearby or have a regional presence, and they've got experience of building within the CDS patch. They know our geographies, and have built at scale. So between them, they've already built around 45,000 premises across the CDS patch. So they have the kind of quantum and track record that we're looking for on these contracts. They've got staff in post, they've got staff who know the area, and they have their commercial investment already agreed, so they have serious backers from pension funds, etc. They've also built to the satisfaction of government on other BDUK contracts across the country. And that last yellow box bottom right is quite a significant one, as an increasing change that we're seeing within the industry. So PIA is passive infrastructure access, and it allows for any telecom supplier who has what are called code powers to use other people's passive infrastructure being essentially ducts or telegraph poles, so be they Openreach, Western Power and Distribution, or indeed each others. And that significantly potentially speeds the rollout. So you're not talking about having to dig up every kilometre of road that you need to get down or erect your own telegraph poles. You can use other people's, and obviously you can see how that would massively help on a deployment of this kind of scale. So within Tinbridge, our records show overall you have just shy of 68,000 premises. Under phase 1, CDS delivered 21,000 and the commercial sector delivered 35, again, roughly split between rural and urban, giving a total of just over 56,000 or 82%. Under our next phase, we're looking at 5,000 premises being delivered by CDS, and I've noted there gigabit capable, and this is just to underscore the point that airband, coming from a background and being known as a UK specialist in fixed wireless, have moved into fibre over the last 12 to 18 months, and all of these properties will be delivered using fibre rather than fixed wireless. In addition, the commercial sector has identified that they're going to do just over 1,000 properties. So that gives us just over another 6,000 to that remaining target. And that would give you coverage of just over 92% across the district. So that's up over 9%. And those percentage points become ever harder won, as you can imagine, as we reach into the harder to reach premises across the whole of the CDS geography. But that does give us 5,000 premises that for whom there is still currently no plan. And I'll come on and address what we might do about those. I know that you're clearly focused on Tinbridge, but just as a kind of overall State of the Union slide, we started with, well, we didn't start with a quantum of 1,100,000 properties. We started with a quantum of about 1 million properties, but as the CDS deployment has moved over the last 7 or 8 years, actually the baseline has grown as well, with new houses being built, houses moving from, say, agricultural into residential, and some significant refinement of the data has seen that target grow. So it is a bit of a moving target. The more properties we deliver, the more properties seem to arrive. But that is where we are intending to be at the end of these phase 2 contracts, that we will have delivered over 1 million properties, 1,058,000, and that's around about 96% of the total, still obviously leaving just under 4% to deliver to. So the answers around properties who are not currently in plan, for whom there is no either commercial or state-funded rollout plan, there are 4 ways of addressing these, and we will be doing so in parallel with these funded contracts. So it's not a question of let's wait and get to 2023, 2024, and then start to think about it. So our intention is very much to do this in parallel. First of all, we have our fibre extension programme, and that's primarily working with Openreach using funding. So there's a funding mechanism within all of the contracts that says essentially that suppliers, once their take-up, i.e. their customer base, has increased above a certain percentage as a result of the upgrading of their infrastructure or the paying for new infrastructure, then they are clearly achieving increased profits, and a proportion of those are paid back to the state in recognition of that. So we have a mechanism, particularly that addresses the phase 1 contract, whereby Openreach pay us back on a phased basis the difference between their target take-up and their actual take-up, and that is not insignificant. So, for example, the original target within the phase 1 contract said that they would start paying back once their take-up exceeded 20% of the premises attached to that new network. in reality, in many cases, and I think averaged across the region, we are hovering at around 70%. So there is a significant difference between the predicted and actual take up, and that works very much to the taxpayer's advantage. Those funds go back into the delivery of superfast broadband, so it's a virtuous circle, if you like. In parallel with that, the government has a rural gigabit voucher scheme where communities can come together and work with a telecoms provider to design their own community solutions. And they do that based on voucher value attributed to each property, which is around 1,500 residential, 3,500 for a business property. And if you pull together 40 or 50 properties, you end up with a serious fighting fund, which is set at the right sort of level. So it's an excellent fund, and we are seeing communities across the patch, including in Tinbridge, where communities are going from, we would like to do something from ourselves, to actually delivering a full fibre network for their community. And we exist to support that. That's one of our key areas of work and growth, if you like. And we do that in two ways. One is in supporting the communities, introducing them to telecoms providers, helping them work their way through the process. But we do also have a small amount of money within our Community Challenge programme. So where there is a small gap, your community might be light, £5,000, £10,000 in some situations, we can step in. And then overlaying all of this, there is the government's national fibre programme, where in parallel with regional builds to deliver on the superfast agenda, there is a national agenda of getting 100% of the UK connected. Well, it has shifted slightly, but essentially the vast majority of the UK connected to fibre, and that will come in parallel with us to address many of those properties that don't have superfast, as well as those properties that do have superfast but need to upgrade to fibre. And I think I'll leave it there because my voice is going.
Thank you for that, Matt. Do we have anything from Neil or Martin Wrigley on that before we do questions?
Matt, could you just give an overview about the additionality from the Tinbridge contribution towards the scheme?
Yeah, absolutely. So Tinbridge, and it was very welcome, contributed 250,000 into the overall contractual element for the last procurement. It's tricky to disaggregate down to where were the properties that this funded, but I think some of the best ways of looking at things are around the uplift that resulted in. So if you look at the totality of the contract, so £78 million, and you look at the number of premises that are being delivered, which is around 56,000 across the region, you can actually come up with an indication as to what a property roughly costs. So the average cost per premise, which is around sort of £1,300. So that would, on your funding, have contributed in another 180 premises within the Tinbridge area. But because of your participation in the CDS procurement and the way those contracts are led, which is on a collaborative model with industry, the leveraging of that funding is around 45% state aid, 55% government, 55% commercial. So you can see that you automatically more than double your premises. So that 180 would grow to over 400, I think something like 420, 425 premises. And that represents even better value for money than you would have seen if you'd gone into the market. So you're easily doubling your money and contributing another 450 premises within the region. I think it is actually much broader than that. I think the fact that you've contributed means that you are active participants within the process, and you've had a hand in the procurement along the way, have approved the setting of those intervention areas for the lots, and enabled and ensured that attention was devoted and focused on Tinbridge, and with a seat on the board, you get to approve and shape the way these contracts function. And I think that probably also is represented clearly in my mind by the difference between the premises that you would have achieved under the GigaClear contracts, which is around 1,400, and on this occasion you're looking at 4,900. So you've increased your coverage under these new framing of the contracts 2.5-fold, if you like. So I think that again is around influence and attention to the district, which means that you have done perhaps rather better than some other districts. Does that answer your question, Neil?
Yes, thank you. One more, a couple of points, Chair, for other members' information. The seat on the board that we have is with Councillor Charles Nuttall, who's on the call today. And also every quarter, as part of the reporting on the council strategy, we do report back on the progress of the Connecting Devon and Somerset project, which until just before Christmas had stalled. So we will be keeping regular dialogue with Matt and keeping members updated as to how the programme's rolling out. Obviously this video will be available for all those members who can't view it. We are keen that if any members would like to find out more for their communities and engage with that, we will share these slides in the members newsletter. But if you want to speak to myself or to Matt about how your communities may engage with the programme further, then just let us know.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, thank you very much. Can we get the slides down now, please?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, questions from members, please. I've got Adrian Patch hand up.
Thank you,
please.
Chair. I think had my main question just answered, which was regarding how local communities can engage with their sort of sometimes quite pressing needs for broadband. So that question's been answered. But I just did have another question regarding one of the maps in the presentation, which showed a purple area, which I think was for broadband across Tinbridge. And that appeared to be close to the boundary with the Dartmoor National Park. And I just wondered, in terms of what Airband is doing, was that the boundary with the National Park, or was that actually the boundary of where their infrastructure currently is at the moment?
So the purple fringing related to phase 1, so that's not Airband, that would be Openreach's infrastructure. So that represents the cabinet infrastructure. We didn't, with the money available, we chose those cabinets that delivered the most connectivity into rural areas that we could possibly afford. So that mapping is not it's not comprehensive when it comes to Openreach's actual infrastructure. It only represents the infrastructure that CDS funded to upgrade. So in that sense, is not at all reflective of Airband's infrastructure. It's only Openreach.
Okay, thank you. Just finally, just following up on that, given that phase 1 there was a project targeting Dartmoor and Exmoor, am I right in thinking that communities within Dartmoor National Park are still eligible for assistance through the schemes that you've outlined?
Yes, absolutely. So in that sense, I suppose we're quite quite binary. If you are not in receipt of superfast, then you qualify for support in varying different ways, as outlined in the presentation, and our focus is always on community. So the fact that there was activity on Dartmoor, if it didn't affect your property or your business, then you remain eligible. Significantly, I suppose, because we currently live in a kind of twin track world, whereby we are ever mindful of the fact that there are properties across the CDS region, particularly in rural parts, that do not have superfast. The fact that the national drive is to achieve gigabit capable speeds with fibre connectivity, we need to protect against the situation where essentially that whole drive then starts again from the market towns and cities within the region and starts rolling out full fibre to those people who already have super fast speeds, and we need to focus on rural areas. However, the way that the funding for a lot of fibre deployment is approved, it means that actually for those properties that do not currently have 100 meg per second, you would qualify for the rural gigabit voucher scheme. So there are some situations, undoubtedly, where there will be communities that have arguably reasonable speeds and the kind of speeds that some people could only dream of, but want more and want fibre. They would be eligible under the government's voucher scheme to upgrade themselves. Our focus needs to be around those premises that are still languishing at sub-super fast, which is not to say that we wouldn't help another community, but I suppose we have to prioritise those communities that are sub-super fast. But the mechanisms for doing so are now gigabit capable. So all of the work that we are putting into communities that might only be getting 2 meg will raise them to potentially up to 1,000 meg per second. They will be gigabit capable.
Okay, thank you very much, and thank you for a very interesting presentation.
Pleasure, thank you.
Councillor David Cox, please.
Thank you very much. I do notice an awful lot of people are moving to Devon and to Teambridge from London. I guess they're taking the view that as they can work from home now, they might as well live by the sea or on the moors. A lot of them will take the internet for granted, and of course they won't know. Is this going to affect plans at all, or is this in any way going to affect people who are going to relocate their businesses to the middle of the moors because they can work remotely because they don't realise that they haven't probably got the internet that they've got in central London?
Well, I think increasingly estate agents, online estate agents, places like Zoopla, will always quote internet speeds as one of those key pieces of information. That there has been a change, and there was undoubtedly a time where that information wasn't as kind of front and center as perhaps it might have been. And clearly within my role, one of the things that I deal with are queries and complaints. And we did see in the past a lot of people who had bought a property and were then appalled at their speeds. That's now dropping off. And I think if people are investing a significant amount of money in relocating from another part of the country, by and large they're tending to check on broadband speeds beforehand. But it is clearly a consideration for anyone moving, and the faster that we can deploy and ensure that speeds are equitable and serviceable across the region, that can only enhance inward investment and people moving to the area.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Councillor John Nutley, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Matt. Yeah, very interesting presentation. As you're probably aware, excuse me, Dartmoor National Park on Friday, we approved a new aerial to go up near home, mainly for emergency services to when that's covered. So that's some good news for that area. It's like Adrian and David just said, obviously the moors pretty well affected. What I was going to ask, do you become involved at all after installation is being carried out if there are any problems? Because if you do, I would like to ask the next question.
So the answer is inevitably, I suppose. Fundamentally, if there are tech support issues or issues around outage, you would naturally take them up with your internet service provider in the first instance. But we have an interest in and there are contractual requirements that the networks that we pay to deliver continue to deliver the range and quality of service that was outlined in the original contracts. So that sounds really waffly. Please do ask your next question.
Yeah, I mean, basically what it is, I mean, I live in Ashburton, and we've been getting on to BT because down through the East Street, one of the main streets coming in through Ashburton, the people down through there, and I know even across the other side of 38, one of my councillor colleagues, they've had awful problems, especially down East Street, and it appears that the cable down through there could be laying in water, etc. a lot of the time,
right?
Which is affecting. Now, whether that's anything you're in a position to take up, I don't know.
I'd need more details, but I'd be delighted to look into it. If you can either contact me directly or contact me through Neil or Councillor Nuttall, then I'd be delighted to take a look. I don't know whether that stretch actually is part of a network that we have funded or not, but obviously we have colleagues within Openreach that we can ask the question of, and maybe apply a little bit of pressure to get it looked into.
Okay, thank you, Matt.
Thank you.
Councillor Mike Hocking, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. A couple of easy questions, really, or at least hopefully. You said earlier on in your presentation, and thank you for that as well, that you had 5,000 applications for funding, but you only gave it to 1,600, or the projects only went to 1,600. Can you tell us why it was such a low percentage that actually got the help or got the project put through? And then secondly, this super fast broadband that you're on about, could you just remind us exactly what speed that is again, please? Because I don't live that far from a green box, therefore and fibre goes into the box, but my speed on average is around about 2022 where I live. And isn't it the fact that as this copper wire gets older, and some of us are sort of living in like early 70s estates, that this copper wire will start to deteriorate and at some point will have to be replaced in order to keep up the speeds? And finally, doesn't the speed actually depend on the broadband supplier? I mean, I'm with Vodafone, obviously using a BT system, or at least a BT network. As I say, I'm getting about 20. I used to be on Virgin, which is obviously the true fibre providers. And again, I wasn't getting anywhere near what they said that I should get. And every time you said to them about it, it's, oh, well, you know, it depends on demand, etc., etc. So there's a couple of little questions. I think just wants to clear up some of the myths and that surround this high-speed broadband.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so I think at least 3 questions there. I'll try, but you may have to remind me. So your first question is quite simple, and I probably didn't explain it very clearly. Essentially, we didn't decline any applications, and this is a voucher scheme that's probably 3 or 4 years old. We didn't decline those. So the 5,000 odd vouchers were approved. What we're seeing is the difference between those that then ultimately went on to take out a service, arrange for an installation. And I mean, we know nationally within voucher schemes that the difference between people expressing an interest and actually finally going on to deliver a service, there's quite a marked difference. I think, in fact, our realization rate, the number of people who went on to actually take out a service, was much higher than the national average, and that's a reflection of the need within the CDS region. I think typically a lot of other voucher schemes, the difference between making an initial inquiry and actually finishing at a point where you've got somebody on the outside of your building, you know, laying cables, drilling holes and putting up aerials, is about 15 to 20%. So I think ours was closer to 30 to 40%. So just to clear that, we didn't say no to people. We approved on the initial expression of interest. We just checked that they were eligible under certain criteria that we had, and then awarded vouchers, but not everyone ultimately took them up. On the question around Superfast, so the definition has changed. When we were delivering the phase 1 program, the EU definition and therefore UK definition was 24 meg per second. That has changed and there's been a bit of realignment, so it's now 30. It was 24. So essentially under phase 1, when Openreach/BT delivered a property that was 24 or 24.5 or higher, that counted as them having delivered another property at Superfast. Below that, as I said, there were you would feel, if you'd been on 2 and you were then getting 22, that was a significant improvement. Didn't technically qualify as Superfast, but you are right. There are grey areas and margins. So it is entirely possible that the quality of your infrastructure may be degrading the speed and resulting in you getting 22 when perhaps you should be getting higher. I mean, I'd need to look into the specifics of your properties to see what actually you should be getting. Openreach, for example, are now much better at providing indicative speeds, so they do provide them over a range, and they do identify several different ranges, and one is a clean, if you like, in a perfect world, given the distance your property is from the fibre enabled cabinet, you should be capable of getting between, but it's still a range, so it's still between 16 and 23 or between 18 and 26 or whatever. And then they do also provide in less than ideal situations, if the infrastructure is slightly older or has been compromised in some respects, then those speeds would be lower. But I'd need to check specifically as to what you should be getting and what you are getting, because if you should be getting 80 and you're only getting 22, that feels like something slightly more fundamental than just infrastructure, which is aging and perhaps not delivering to 100% of its capability. And I'm sensing that I've not answered your third question.
The third question was quite simply, doesn't some of the speeds and that depend on the actual supplier?
Oh, sorry. Yes, absolutely. Yes, of course. So yes, they do. We have some situations where people are capable of getting Superfast, but were unaware that they had to order a new service. So are in some cases can be languishing on 5 meg when they could actually get 35. Then it does depend on the internet service provider that you contract with, and you will be contracting for speeds at a certain level. So the fact that your connection is capable of delivering 60 meg, if you take out a contract at a certain level, which gives you guaranteed, in inverted commas, speeds on a range between 20 and 30, you are only ever going to get 30, even though the infrastructure is capable of delivering much faster. So it can depend on what level of contract you have actually taken out. And depending on the internet service provider, they may not have a product that they are prepared to offer you, which does take advantage of the full speeds that you could achieve. So they may not have a product that would deliver you 60 meg, they may have a cap at 50, and you would then actually need to shop around to find another ISP who has a product that would take advantage of that speed. So it's a combination of what the laws of physics dictate are possible for your property, combined with age of the infrastructure, etc., but also what you've actually asked for and paid for. Thanks, Mike.
Okay, thank you. That seems, I think that's all the questions now. Thank you very much, Matt, for your comprehensive presentation and answering all our questions. Much appreciated.
Pleasure. That's a pleasure. Thank you very much. And yeah, if anything occurs to you latterly, my contact details are readily available, and I'm here to answer your questions. So please don't hesitate to ask. But with that, thank you all for your time. I am aware that I do bang on, so I'm grateful for your patience. And I'll leave now.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on. Check on. Moving on to item 9, budget final financial plan proposals. I will ask Executive Member Councillor Keeling to introduce the budget item. Martin Flitcroft, Chief Finance Officer, is in attendance and will present the budget in more detail. I'll then invite committee members to ask any questions and then the executive members to make any comments. The council will be considering this item at its meeting on the 22nd of February and the executive on 11th of February. The recommendation from this committee is set out at agenda pages 17 and 18. Councillor Keeling, can I ask you that you introduce the final budget proposals? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you for allowing me to bring the final budget report 2021 to 22 and onwards. Dear colleagues, can I first pay tribute to our staff who have contributed to the savings made, some £2 million. My thanks also to our Chief Financial Officer, Martin Flitcroft, and his team. On the 4th of February, we received the final settlement from government, and there are no material changes between the provisional settlement I shared with you on the 12th of January and the final settlement for Teignbridge District Council now. Colleagues, I would like to bring to your attention the new homes bonus. A new round of allocations were announced in the settlement, and we're in year 11 now. These allocations are a one-off and will not attract future legacy payments. In fact, the written statement underlines that this will be the final set of allocations under the current approach. Ministers are keen to replace the new homes bonus and plan to consult shortly on the future of it. Also, no guarantees are given about local government funding reform. We are still expecting the reforms to be implemented in 22-23, but the government written statement only comments to revisit the priorities for financial reform in time for the next spending review. Ministers will also be taking into account wider work on the future of the business rates. So, our final budget proposal are updated from the lockdown. So no significant changes apart from a budget gap widening next year to 1.2 million. So moving forward, we expect next year to be balanced by earmark reserves, a budget gap of 1.2 million, 22 to 23, and 2.8 million, 23 to 24. So, councillors, over the 3 years, we have a budget gap of £3.8 million. We have managed to keep our capital programme unchanged, but we're just slightly scheduling changes on dates. And we are also considering whether we can reinstate the £0.5 million revenue contribution from the reserves to capital. and we will keep this as an option. So colleagues, working together across all political groups, we can and will make Teambridge into a green recovery and a sustainable place to work and live. Martin will now take you through our funnel slide, and I'm pleased to see that Chris Clarence is still here, and Martin will give you some detail on that. We'll both be happy to answer questions afterwards at the end of Martin's presentation. Martin, please.
Thank you. So just a brief run through the budget report. As Councillor Keeling's mentioned, these are the final budget proposals for the years 21-22 going through to 23-24. The figures in the report were based on the provisional settlement, and we have now got the final settlement with no changes for Teambridge, and they go before Parliament tomorrow, so should be approved tomorrow. What that also means as well is that referendum limits are unchanged, being the higher of 2% or £5. The figures in the final budget proposals reflect the latest lockdown, no material changes to the capital programme, and the final budget proposals also include a mid-year review of Treasury Management, which we're required to do under our Treasury Management Code to be noted by Council, and some extra details in the appendices around cost per service area. So just running through the key recommendations again, a £5 increase in council tax to £180.17, increasing climate change funding, continuing funding for enhanced planning enforcement, maintaining revenue reserves at just under £2 million, increasing support for housing with the Teambridge 100, infrastructure delivery plan investment, continuation of the grant-funded South West Regional Coastal Monitoring Programme, and town centre investment in infrastructure and employment. Section 2 of the Executive Report sets the scene around reductions in government funding, savings, COVID-19 impacts, and the inclusion of the Teambridge 100 in the capital programme, together with provisions for climate change projects and the future High Street Funds bid. Section 3 of the report provides more detail on the savings made to assist with the budget gaps that have arisen. I would point you to 3.3 in particular, and the future costs impacting on the council in 3.9. The mid-year review of Treasury Management is in 3.11. Section 4 covers the revenue budget at Appendix 4 and fees and charges at Appendix 5. General inflation increases in both charges across the fees and charges piece, and some charges at Newton Abbot Market have been frozen, having been reduced last year. 4.2 to 4.4 gives more details on fees and charges. Section 4 also looks at our proposed change in council tax and provides a multi-year summary of how our funding has changed from government to include revenue support grant, business rates, and new homes bonus. A reduction of 35% has occurred over that time period. The key paragraph is 4.27 and how we have funded the budget gaps. We still have a budget gap of 1.2 million in 22-23 and 2.6 million in 23-24. On top of that would be the aspirations to put additional funds back into our capital programme of around about 0.5 million. Failure to deliver savings, obtain greater funding from government, could trigger the issue of a Section 114 notice in the future. Section 5 includes details of the capital programme. Again, no material changes from the initial budget proposals, and that's at Appendix 7. And as I stated, includes the housing via that Teambridge 100 scheme, climate change, infrastructure and employment. Section 6 covers the consultation on the budget proposals, and the outcomes of our budget survey were reported to Executive on Thursday and will form part of the full Council budget report via an additional appendix. So that's a quick whip through the report. I'll also now share my screen and go through a funding chart, which in the past members have found quite useful, and this is the latest version of it. So on this budget forecast, we've got both sets of revenue and capital funding shown. The top half, so if we go top half left, is the income that we get for the revenue budget, and then the green lines flowing below are where that money is spent. So if you go around the chart, we start with fees and charges at 10.5 million in the first grey circle on the left-hand side, just above the big green line in the middle. That covers all our fees and charges from our various sources like leisure, car parking, planning, etc. Then we've got property income and contribution from reserves at 9.8 million. That covers all the property rents, recycling credits, sales of recycling material, and obviously to balance the books this year, 3.3 million from the contribution from reserves, which is coming from earmark reserves. Council tax income is there at 8.7 million. That's our demand on council taxpayers, and that percentage is has been reducing over the years. It used to be 11%, dipped down below 9%, and is probably going to be closer to 8.5% when we get the precepts from all the other preceptors this year. The large one in the middle there is the grants that we get for other items. Most of that is the grant for housing benefit at 26.9 million. The money we get from business rates, our share is the 4.7 million to the right of that. Revenue support grant now is 0. That used to be 4.5 million a few years ago. And new homes bonus, as you can see, is shrinking as well. That's down to 1.5 million now for new homes that are built. So that gives us £62.1 million worth of funding for the revenue budget. And then that flows out into those light green arrows at the bottom of the chart. You've got the first one, leisure, open spaces and resorts, fairly self-explanatory at 6.1 million. A heading called governance, communications, corporate services and transformation at 4.8 million. That covers SLT, democratic services, all the main support services, electoral services, internal audit, finance, HR, members' allowances and procurement. And you've got other housing and health services at 4.3 million. That covers housing, environmental health, licensing and customer services. Revenue and benefits at 26.2 million. The majority of that is the housing benefits that we pay, plus the cost of the team for administering that service. Waste recycling and cleansing, fairly self-explanatory at 9.4 million. Strategic place services, including economy and planning at 9.2 million. That covers building control, development management, parking, economy and spatial planning. And then there's the financing items, which covers the pensions, bank charges, audit fees and any contribution to reserves at 2.1 million. So the left-hand side of that chart is our revenue budget. And then the same procedure applies to the right-hand side, which is our capital budget, 38.5 million. Again, you can see the types of funding at the top and where that money is spent at the bottom. So capital receipts, which is the money we get from sale of assets and right to buy monies, 2.6 million. Capital grants at 14.5 million. Section 106 monies at 0.8 million. Any schemes that require borrowing at 17.9 million, and SIL at 2.7 million. Again, as that flows through down to the bottom, the spends are around 0.5 million on IT and central support services. Flood alleviation and environment at 5.5 million. That covers flood defences, coastal monitoring, carbon management and climate change. Open spaces and leisure at 6.9 million. Covers play areas, SANG, sports centres, cycle paths and sports pitches. Planning and development at 20.5 million. Covers employment land, town centre regeneration and the hotel developments. And then you've got housing grants and affordable housing, which includes the Teambridge 100, the Warm Homes Fund, private sector housing, the DFG type of thing. So that's a quick whip around the budgets that we've got for next year in terms of revenue and capital. I'm happy at that point to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Martin. I can't see any questions, actually. There was just one for me, probably me just not knowing enough about this. In the revenue budget, there's leisure, open spaces and resorts 6.1, and then in the capital as well. Are they, do they go to separate things, or is that all lumped in together? If that makes any sense.
So the revenue cost is your daily running costs. So that's a daily running cost for the leisure centre. That's the staff, the cost of running the seafront activities and resorts, etc. On the capital side, that's any capital improvements that are taking place at those centres, whether that might be new gym equipment or improvements to the building itself or the heating systems or that type of thing. So what the left-hand side revenue, the right-hand side capital, so they are distinct and separate.
Thank you. Councillor Mike Hocking, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Sorry, I couldn't find me button. Yeah, just a quick one, really. The 9.6 million we got for the High Street, is that within the 14.5 million on your thing there, your diagram? And the 17.9 million of borrowing, is that new borrowing, or is that to help bring up the money that you're taking out of earmarked reserves, which it'd be nice to know what those earmarked reserves were before you took them out of the budget. And is it not possible? I know you can't use borrowing to go to revenue, but is it not possible to take more earmarked reserves out and borrow more so that the gap is no longer, the hole that you've got is no longer there? I think I've tried to explain it correctly, but it just seems you're borrowing money, obviously, and I can understand that money's cheap at the moment. Wouldn't it have been better to borrow a little bit more, take a bit more out of earmarked reserves and borrow a little bit more, so as not to have this gap that you've got coming up next year? Thank you.
Yeah, so the capital grants will include any grants that we've got relating to schemes in 21-22. So you can relate them back to the capital programme appendix in the papers as well, because they've got items identified as to where the funds come from in brackets. So if the Future High Streets Fund will be included in there. In terms of the earmark reserves, I'll come to the borrowing bit in a minute. In terms of the earmark reserves, so what we've done with that is we had some carry forward reserves, and the vast majority of the monies that we're using, we always knew prior to COVID that there was going to be a funding issue because of government changing the rules on new homes bonus, changing the rules on business rates, and we losing the growth that we've obtained over the last few years. So in anticipation of that, over the last few years, we've been putting money aside to alleviate that cliff fall that was meant to have been this year. Obviously, COVID came along and messed all that up. We've benefited by that because obviously that growth wasn't taken away, could be taken away next year now, depending on what happens with government consultation on the whole funding package. So we were able to use that funding this year to bridge the gap that COVID had produced, you know, over and above what government haven't funded us for. So that sort of pushes the issue on a little bit, which is why we've now got the 1.2 million gap next year, because our medium-term financial plan assumes that we'll lose that growth next year. The borrowing that you talk about is borrowing for the specific projects that are within the capital programme. So all our business cases in the future are around borrowing because our capital receipts are dwindling. If we've got specific capital receipts for specific projects, we will use them for that. But outside of that, so like the hotel development, you know, that's where the borrowing is. But again, it's based on a business case. So as long as the business case stacks up with the borrowing in there and we make a return, then that's where the borrowing is coming from. So the borrowing is only based on the capital programme projects that are in there for next year that require borrowing. Increasing borrowing doesn't protect your budget gap or change what you're doing with earmark reserves, because that's not a source of funding that will reduce that gap. It's only a funding source where you've got then to put money aside to repay capital or repay the interest on the borrowing. So that's where we are with borrowing. It can only be used to fund specific capital projects. Does that answer your questions?
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Councillor Adrian Patch, please.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to raise an issue which has come up at Council within the last 12 months, and that is the possibility of bringing some kind of, well, initially I think it was talked about a voluntary charge for tourists for occupying hotel beds and maybe other accommodation for tourists as well. I just wondered if any modelling has been done sort of financially to see what sort of income we might be expected to achieve under different scenarios. For instance, if, as some have suggested, there were a compulsory tourist tax on hotel beds across Teambridge, it would seem that we've got a situation now where there's likely to be huge demand for holidaying in Devon and, well, across Teambridge this forthcoming summer, and indeed probably sort of future summers for the foreseeable time. And this might be quite a substantial opportunity, depending on how such a scheme were administered and on what levels charges were set as sort of some kind of tourist tax. And I know that's a contentious term, but initially the question is simply, has any modelling been undertaken as to what this type of exercise might bring in?
Yeah, thanks for the question. Yeah, it was talked about, as you say, a while ago, but I haven't been involved in any modelling. I think there's some legal aspects around how you could bring the charge in as well. So I think that was being looked at. But I'll certainly follow it up and see where that might take us in the future, because it'd be one of interest to me as well to see if that comes in. I mean, essentially it can be deemed a separate tax charge, can't it? But it might be of use if we've got a significant income or input from people coming on holiday here in the next couple of years because of COVID. So yeah, I will look into that.
Thank you.
I've got an executive member, but it doesn't say who with their hand up.
It's Nina Jeffries.
Hi, Nina.
Hi. It was just in answer. I can't see very well because my screen's so tiny, but it was just in response to Councillor Patch. There's been several presentations on the tourism contribution that I'm planning to bring in this year, if that's what you were referring to. And we have done some modelling. Obviously, the accommodation providers have been greatly affected with the COVID and lockdowns and everything. But there are plans for us to look at launching that this year. We're just going to be going through some modelling from March to have a look at the potential changes with the movements and people coming down here to stay, etc. So we can definitely update you on those figures at some point in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Nina. I think that's all the questions now. Right, if I read out the recommendation, that the committee recommends that the proposals be considered together with any subsequent consultation comments for approval by council as the final budget 2021-22, and the outline plan for subsequent years 2022-23 and 2023-24. The proposed budget includes an increase in council tax of £5 or 2.85% to £180.17. Continued funding for a climate change officer and enhanced planning enforcement, increased provision in the capital programme for climate change projects, the continuing reduction in new homes bonus, other central funding reductions, in particular provisional assumptions for business rates for future years, and reset of the baseline. Reserves at 13% of the net revenue budget, or just under 2 million. Increased support for housing, including the Teambridge 100, whilst backing business and bringing people and organisations together for local neighbourhood planning. Infrastructure delivery plan investment funded by community infrastructure levy and external sources where available. Continuation of grant funded Southwest Regional Monitoring Programme, town centre investment in infrastructure and employment, use of long-term borrowing where appropriate, assumptions of a 1.5% pay deal, reducing rural funding frozen during the COVID-19 pandemic. I would like to propose that we recommend that. Could I have a seconder on that, please?
I'll second that, Chair.
Thank you. I think that'll probably be a roll call for that one.
Yes, Chair, we can do a roll call for this one.
Okay, lovely. Thank you.
All right, Councillor Clarence.
I think he's left.
He's gone. Okay.
Yeah.
Councillor David Cox.
In favour.
Councillor Foden.
For, yes.
Councillor Hocking.
Yeah, 4.
Councillor Malone.
Sorry, 4.
Councillor Nutley.
4.
Councillor Patch.
4.
Councillor Rollison.
4.
Councillor Thorne.
4.
Councillor Jenks.
4.
And yourself, Chair.
4.
That's unanimous. Thank you.
Okay. I think we're coming up to an hour and a half.
Chair, sorry, if I may,
sorry.
we just need to do the other part of the recommendation to Council to note the mid-year review of Treasury Management, Appendix 8, which is agenda pages 71 to 74.
Okay. Okay, I'll note that. I think everyone can do a hands on that just to make sure everyone's happy to note that.
Are there any against? And any Councillor Cox, David Cox, are you voting against?
No, in favour.
No.
Sorry.
Okay. And are there? There's none against. Are there any abstentions? That's fine. That's unanimous. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. I think maybe have a quick break now because we're coming up to an hour and a half. Would that be okay with everyone? If we said 10 minutes, is that okay? Ooh, what's happening there? Sorry, Trish, I couldn't hear you there. Right. Whew, right, 10 minutes. Could we get started again now, please?
Sounds like a good idea.
Right. Do we need to do another roll call, or are we okay with?
Chair, I think Trish isn't back yet.
Okay.
Do you want to give it another? No, sorry, she's back.
Anyone isn't here, can they put their hand up?
That's a good way of doing it. Do we need to do a roll call again, Trish, or is everyone there? I can see.
Yes, Chair, that would be best.
Okay, do that then.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, Councillor David Cox.
I'm here.
Councillor Foden.
Present.
Councillor Hocking.
Yeah, I'm here, but may have to leave just after 12. I'm sorry.
Councillor Malone. Councillor Malone, are you with us? Not at the moment. Okay, Councillor Nutley.
Present.
Councillor Patch.
Present.
Councillor Rollison.
Present.
Councillor Thorne.
Present.
Councillor Jenks.
Present.
Yourself, Chair. Just checking. Councillor Malone, are you back with us? No, we're all present, Chair, apart from Councillor Malone.
Okay, thank you. Item 10, Council Strategy Performance Monitoring Q3. I'd like to ask Executive Member Councillor Connett and Liz Jingwell, Project Manager, Business Improvement and Development, to present the report. EMs will then be invited to make any additional comments on their areas of responsibility. Councillor Connett, Liz, can I ask you to present the report? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Shall I just briefly introduce and then hand over to Liz to take colleagues through the detail? So very much a summarised format, and you'll see the performance of the council and the highlight of the areas where performance is less than green. Very much, I think, a good performance for the council given the past year and the challenges that all of us, and particularly all of our staff, have faced. So with that, Chair, I'll pass over to Liz. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you, Councillor Connett. So this is the Q3 performance report. So this covers the period from the 1st of October to the 31st of December, during which we had the second lockdown in place for 4 weeks. The report then goes on to give a brief summary of the finance, which you've already heard of detailed information from our finance officer in the previous item. In terms of the actual T10 programmes, this is the same as it was for the last couple of quarters. We've got 7 of the T10 programmes are currently on track across the whole council strategy for both ONS committees. We've got the roof over our heads continues to be a concern within OS Committee 1. Going to town, out and about and active, and continuing to be concerns in ONS Committee 2. Of the performance indicators, this time we have 38 in the strategy included, of which we've got 11 ahead of target, 9 on target, and 4 underperforming. And those 4 underperforming ones are within the roof over our head T10 programme, and they're covered later on in the report in more detail. This is actually an improvement on the previous quarter when there were more underperforming PIs. The T10 projects, we've got 54 reported, of which 47 are on track and 7 are reported with a concern status. Of those, we've got 4 reported in roof over our heads, and the other ones are reported within the other ONS2 committee report. Okay, if we move on to page 79. This gives us more detail about the areas within the ONS1 committee. So starting at the top, we've got action on climate, T10. This is on track. However, we can see that there's one project in here that is been assessed as a caution, the review of the use of single plastics within our council offices. This has obviously been delayed or put on hold because actually not many of us are visiting our offices for work at the moment, but there are plans afoot to increase that and run out initiatives once we do start returning to work in our office areas. Roof over our heads, this is the whole programme still remains the caution status, and as you'll see in the actual summary report, the reason for this is that it's a direct result of COVID, national lockdowns, and obviously the housing delivery chain. However, there is some good news within this overview, as well as the areas which haven't managed to progress due to housing delivery, etc. We still managed to have a good number of good reduction in empty homes, and preventing homelessness performance indicators are still performing ahead of target, which is good news. In terms of the ones that aren't performing so well, we've got net additional homes provided. This has been impacted, as you can see across the table bar, throughout the COVID pandemic. We're not going to meet target this year, that's stated in the notes here. And there's also some information regarding the new local plan review and the new local plan process, which has been put into place, together with a note about the increased targets that we're trying to achieve on housing. Similarly, the PIs down here, there's 2 on affordable homes. There's one on average homes, affordable homes, urban areas and in rural areas. Again, these have had a significant hit due to COVID restrictions and slowdown in the house building. However, and neither of these are likely to meet target, but there is some progress being made with the affordable homes in urban areas, which again is cited in the notes here. But the final one is to do with vulnerable and elderly residents being assisted to stay in their own homes. And this one does look like it will be on target by the end of the year, despite the COVID restrictions that we've had in place, which is again to be good news. So the final 3 caution areas within this report are the 3 projects under roof over our head: developing social rented apartments, 10 units of supported accommodation, and a plan for shared housing scheme for single households. Again, these have all been impacted due to the COVID restrictions and the pandemic, the impact directly or directly on budget and on the housing chain delivery. The final 2 areas within this report are Clean Scene, where it's currently on track. There's a note here to say that we're still waiting for final data for the household recycling rate and residual household waste. That will be coming out very shortly, by the end of this month. And then also Strong Communities is also on track as a programme. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Liz. Are there any committee members got any questions on that, please? Councillor Dave Rollison, please.
Thank you, Chairman. First of all, I think the team are doing a great job, because it can't be easy in these very, very difficult times to achieve any target. So that's great. I'm just wondering that we're hearing on the news and so on that COVID may be with us for quite a long time in one shape or another, even with the vaccines. And is there anything we can do to compensate for the impact COVID has on our activities, so that we can reach targets in the longer term? I mean, if our ways of working and our precautions need to go forward, maybe not quite as severe as they are, but in some sense, we're going to have to find a way around this, aren't we? And I don't think this is a quick solution, but is there something you can do in the medium to long term, just in case COVID's going to be with us for a while? Thank you, Chairman.
Chairman, if you'd like me, I can respond to that question. It's probably more mine than an officer's, in the sense that there are some things that we can do. So I'm very heartened by the way the council have continued challenging empty homes and reduced that. and have done work to make sure the disabled facility grants are out. We're doing those homes adaptations. So what we can, where we can, how we can, being inventive and adaptive, I think is, you know, what we'd all want. There are some things over which we can have little control. So the rate at which developers build out houses, which affects us because we're held to account for it, but we don't build the houses that developers have consent for. I think nationally, there's going to have to be a conversation around that, and in terms of how the nation builds houses. And I make just the widest general point around that. And I think that's a governmental conversation with the industry. Within Teambridge, certainly when I speak with the chief officers, and I believe executive members do as well, we are very focused on getting done that which we can do. And if we can't do it, understanding the reasons for it and keeping it under review. So I hope that provides some reassurance to colleagues that we're very mindful of getting on with things that we can get on with and trying to find ways round so that people aren't unnecessarily kept waiting. Although in truth, over the year, some people have undoubtedly experienced a delay because we've not been able to do things as quickly as we would have liked.
Thank you for that.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the answer, Alan.
Okay. I think Nina's still got her hand up on a minute. I've got no more questions on that. Just if any members of the executive got any comments they'd like to add to this section. I don't think so. Thank you all for that. Right, on to item 10, executive member biannual presentation. Councillor Jackie Hook.
Sorry, Chair, if I may, yeah, there's a recommendation with the with agenda item 10 on the performance monitoring, to note the report and actions being taken to rectify performance issues detailed in the appendix. So we just need to have a proposer and seconder on that, please.
I'd like to propose to note that.
Happy to second it, Chair.
Okay, can we do a hands on that one, please?
And thank you. Are there any against? And any abstentions? There's one abstention. It was carried by a majority. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Item 10, executive member biannual presentation. Councillor Jackie Hook, climate change. There will be time for questions following the update. Should questions be asked that Councillor Hook does not have the information at hand to answer, responses will be provided by email or via the members' newsletter. Councillor Hook, could I ask you to give your update to the committee? Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Chair. There should be some slides coming up now. Okay, thank you very much. I was going to divide my presentation into two sections. So firstly, climate change, and within climate change, I will include work we're doing on the ecological emergency. And secondly, work in the area of flood and coastal risk management. So next slide, please. Most of you will know, hopefully, that we appointed William Elliott as our climate change officer early in 2020. Next slide. And allocating the necessary staff resource was a commitment we made within our climate change declaration, which we made back in April 2019. This photo was taken February last year, obviously pre-COVID, because there's William and I shaking hands. We have an ambitious net zero target, as we all know, of 2025. And this is the district-wide target, not just a target for the own council's operations. William works within the environmental health team led by David Eaton, but as you might imagine, his work is cross-cutting across all the departments of the council. I just wanted to take this opportunity to thank David and William for the tremendous work they're putting in and the progress we've made, which obviously I'll go on now to outline. But I also wanted to thank the officers and the senior leadership team at the council and the commitment of all of our councillors to the target that we have. there's a unanimity of purpose at Teambridge, which not all councils experience. We are all on the same page, and I wanted to thank everybody for that. We also have the fantastic and invaluable support of our community partners, Action on Climate in Teambridge, who we meet with regularly. They have a role in helping to take project forward and coordinating action out in our community. And I hope you're all familiar with their work, because I do always mention it every time I talk about climate change. Just to say, I have attended and spoken at several webinar and virtual events across Devon and nationwide, actually, and can report that many councils and other district councillors are envious of the progress we are making and the level of collaboration we have achieved at this council. Not that we're resting on our laurels at all, but I just wanted to report that, because members might not be aware of that. It's only when you go out and talk to other people you realise that the good position that we're in. Next slide, please. So there's two. Just talking about our district's carbon footprint now. There's obviously two elements, the district's carbon footprint and the council's own carbon footprint. So first, to look at the district's wider footprint, the impact of newly built development does actually form a small part of the district's total emissions, and new building stock, in fact, only forms 1% of the emissions of all total housing stock. But of course, we do have the means to strongly influence new development and building design via our local plan. So a couple of slides on the local plan. The first one, obviously, about our existing local plan, which provides the current context for managing planning applications. Many, including myself, don't feel that the policies within our current plan reflect the level of carbon reduction that we are required to achieve, but we are legally bound by this local plan at the moment. And, as I've reported before, we have updated the carbon calculator, which sits behind policy S7, so that now it is based entirely on building emissions and excludes other factors, such as the provision of sustainable travel infrastructure, which had resulted in a slightly absurd situation where some developments merely passed policy S7 by being located near to a bus route or cycle route, for example, without having to look at their building emissions at all. So that has now changed. But of course, all of those other aspects, EV charging, sustainable travel, etc., are still covered by other policies within the local plan. So this new carbon calculator is providing a significant challenge to new development now and increasing the level of carbon reduction required. And we were able to do that because it was updating the local plan in line with national carbon reduction targets. It's not something that you can do to update all policies, but you can update them to bring them in line with national targets, which is what we did. Next slide, please. So on to our new draft local plan, which includes a whole chapter on climate change. And these, as you know, were worked up by the local plan working group meetings, cross-party meetings, public consultation on the policy aspects of the draft local plan took place between March and July last year. So there's some way to go before this plan is adopted, but obviously we'd like to progress as quickly as possible so that we can get these ambitious policies that relate to biodiversity, sustainable travel, net zero homes, etc. And we'll provide an important tool going forward and foundation for a sustainable and resilient recovery for our district, obviously within the context of national demands and national planning policy. But this is something that we would like to progress with as quickly as possible, and I hope others agree. Next slide, please. So, district heating network. Hopefully you'll know a bit about this. It's obviously a very complex project, involves the coordination of several housing developments, the county, Exeter City, because there's a school involved as well, heat network providers, etc., and requires the installation of underground network, which happens prior to the development, with the heat being sourced by the waste to energy plant at Matford. which will be pumped through to homes and avoids the houses having to connect to the gas grid. The Teambridge project lead is Fergus Pate, but as mentioned, this is a very complex project which requires the cooperation of a number of partners, including a number of housing developers. But success here will result in a significant approximate 70% carbon saving from this development going forwards, and will act as an exemplar for other such schemes. And we should remember, of course, that it is the biggest part of the carbon footprint of development is the ongoing use by residents of heating and how they travel about in their daily lives. This is where the major significant impact of new development will be. And if we can get the results right through good planning now, then that's a significant role that our council can play in terms of the new development that we will have taking place in our district. Next slide, please. So electric vehicle charging. Obviously, reducing car use is the key objective going forwards, but in a largely rural district, the car will be here to stay and will increasingly be low emission and or electric. And councils do obviously have a role in kick-starting charging provision. So we have approved our electric vehicle and low emission vehicles policy, which can be found on our website. And this commits us, amongst other things, to making new residential and larger employment developments EV ready, in recognition that most EV charging, of course, will take place either at home or at work. And our current and draft local plan also contain policies that will require new development to install EV charging. But we will be installing public charging, and we already have the 4 that we've installed at Buckfossley and Chudley, and there are others to follow. So there's the Delete project, which they're due to be installed by February next year, and there's 4 locations: Barton Hill Car Park, East Cliff Car Park, Teignmouth, Newfoundland Way, Newton Abbot, and Ford House, Newton Abbot. And then another project, the off-street residential charging scheme, which in our case actually will be sites that are in car parks. I won't read out the actual names of the car parks, but just to let you know, those sites are in Newton Abbot, Kingstainton, Buckfossley, Chudley, Bobby, Tracy, Morton Hampstead, Shoulden, Dawlish, Teignmouth, Ashburton, Starcross, Widdicombe and Dawlish Warren. So across our whole district. And that's another bid we've put in and are involved with. But it's worth remembering that homeowners and small businesses with their own charging facility are now able to rent out their driveway or premises to other EV users. And you can find out where they are via ZapMap and CoCharger and other such facilities. Worth mentioning also that we are currently in talks with Co-Cars about expanding their network of shared electric cars and shared charge points into Teambridge. So the opportunities for shared and public charging are growing rapidly, obviously, and will continue to do so. And we are picking that up along the way. Next slide, please. So just a couple of slides on housing initiatives. Obviously, this is Martin Wrigley's area, but Teambridge District Council is continually looking at opportunities to take advantage of government funding for delivering energy efficiency and low carbon heating measures to our existing housing stock. And that's where our 23% of our district carbon emissions come from existing housing stock. We've recently received confirmation that we've been successful in a bid for £1.14 million Green Homes Grant, and that will deliver air source heat pumps and associated energy works. Last year also we launched a solar bulk buying project, the Solar Together Devon, which enables those taking part to achieve substantial savings on the purchase of residential solar and battery storage. The uptake was really good and the works are currently underway at those properties. Next slide. You also know, of course, of our desire to build our own council social rent affordable properties, which are also low carbon. So we have Drake Road, East Street and Sherborne House in Newton Abbot, which are the first of a pipeline of such projects. So not only are these properties at social rent levels, but of course they'll be cheaper to heat and run for the tenants. Next slide. Now going on to look at the council's own carbon footprint, and this is where William has been concentrating most of his time since he joined us, on the basis, of course, that we can't tell others what to do until we've laid out a clear plan of how we will deal with our own emissions. So a key first action is measuring where we are and then monitoring our improvement. William has completed our 2018-19 carbon footprint, which is no simple exercise, especially considering our scope 3 emissions, those over which we don't have direct influence and form actually the largest portion of our emissions. He's now working on our 2019-2020 footprint and also working on the carbon action plan to identify the most cost and carbon efficient ways to becoming a carbon neutral council. Next slide. So the carbon action plan will outline about 40 projects which cover our 15 top carbon emitting buildings. We've allocated 3.6 million over the next 3 years, but I've also put in grant applications to the public sector decarbonisation scheme to provide 3.1 million, which if we were successful will enable us to complete even more of those top projects with the allocated 3.6 million. We were due to hear whether we were successful with the public sector decarbonisation bid last week. We haven't heard yet, but the communication with funders goes on and we remain hopeful of success. So I'll let you have the news when we hear it. Next slide, please. So you'll all be aware of the context above us and Devon's own carbon plan. As you know, Teambridge District Council is a signatory of the Devon Climate Emergency Declaration. The interim Devon Carbon Plan is currently out for public consultation, and you are able to make comments up until February the 15th, so I urge you to do that. The Citizens' Assembly, which, if it was not for COVID, would have taken place by now, is planned to take place this year, probably in a virtual format, and will consider the more potentially controversial aspects of the plan. The final Devon Carbon Plan is due for adoption this summer. Just to say, it is a non-statutory plan and does of course depend on all partners, including ourselves, enacting its policies and actions. Next slide. On to just a couple of slides on the ecology work as a result of our declaration of an ecological emergency September last year. As I've said before, I summarised the work at last ONS committee. You know, there is much good work going on already at our council and together with partners, it had almost sort of been hidden away in a sense and didn't neatly fall under any executive member's responsibility. So, you know, hopefully we'll be high profile in it a lot more now. There is no dedicated officer to this emergency, and this work doesn't fall under William's job description. In terms of work, as you know, we had our 1,500 per year target on tree planting, and we have kept to that target. A tree strategy is nearing completion and will soon be available for public consultation. The council has given £5,000 to Devon Wildlife Trust to support habitat mapping and monitoring habitat quality, and obviously this will inform decision making about the interventions needed and how we can get net biodiversity gain. Next slide, please. Hopefully you're aware of the current consultation on the Connecting to Nature project, which runs until February 15th. That covers the Heart of Teambridge area, Newton Abbot, Kingston and Kings Kerswell, and is looking at linking public green spaces and improving their value to wildlife, as well as access for the public. So in terms of what we as a council can do to increase our activity on the ecological emergency agenda, you will be discussing as the next agenda item, discussing setting up a possible task group that hopefully will look at how we can support environmental organisations that are already working in our district to achieve more through better linkages and investigate funding sources and how we might maximise their use in Teambridge. I, for one, continually seeing on my Facebook feed opportunities for funding for environmental projects, and it is about bringing all those together and picking up that opportunity. One of those environment organisations that is already doing a great job is Action on Climate in Teambridge Ecology Group, which, as you'll know, have set up the Wildlife Wardens scheme. The wardens are volunteers. They can operate flexibly in their parish or chosen area and look after and improve wildlife and habitats. Training is provided and no expert knowledge is required. So I hope you'll continue to promote that. They've had tremendous success already, I think over 70, several of those already trained up. So, you know, they're doing really well, but there is room for more. Next slide, thank you. Right, on to the second portion of my presentation, and this is on flood and coastal risk management. This work is led by Richard Rainbow, who's our Drainage and Coastal Manager. Next slide. Teambridge District Council has statutory responsibilities as a risk management authority, tasked with managing flood risk within our district, which includes managing flood defence assets, watercourses, and land which is under our control. Teambridge District Council also acts as the Coastal Protection Authority, managing coastal erosion and flood defence assets under our control. Staff also provide planning advice related to strategic planning, so local plan, and individual development projects, so planning applications, and obviously our local plans and sites, etc. Next slide, thank you. So Teambridge hosts the Tean Estuary and Coastal Partnership, which brings together a variety of stakeholders and interest groups to ensure coordinated approach to coastal management, economic development, public access and water quality. The partnership leads or is involved in a number of initiatives covering these areas of work, and also operates a small grants fund for community groups wanting to help manage the partnership area. Teambridge District Council also hosts the South Devon and Dorset Coastal Authorities Group, and this group delivers the shoreline management plans, which informs strategic planning related to the coast and agrees coastal protection schemes. Thank you. On to the Southwest Coastal Monitoring Programme, and this is the largest area in the National Coast Monitoring Programme. So it's a national programme. The programme provides a cost-effective standardised method of monitoring the coastal environment. The information is used for the development of shoreline management plans, coastal defence strategy and flood defence. This is all funded by DEFRA, and the data collected is available free of charge to anyone. So the website's there. You can go and have a look at the data that's collected yourselves, which is really interesting. Okay, next slide. On to the local flood risk management strategy. This is Devon County Council strategy and is due for approval in spring this year, following recent public consultation. And the good news is that several areas in our district have been prioritised for flood alleviation works in Dawlish, Teignmouth, Newton Abbot, Kingstainton and Exeter. In addition, work on other related projects, for example, as part of the Garden Communities funding, is supporting the strategy, including more innovative approaches to natural flood risk management in river catchments, designed to keep water retained naturally and draining more gradually to the river system. And a lot of that work will be related to the development in the Newton Abbot area and funded by the Garden Communities project. So that's some really interesting work on natural flood risk management. I should say there's a lot of detail behind these slides and I am rushing through it in a sense. So, you know, do ask any questions afterwards because there's a lot more that I could say. Next slide, please. A few slides on the district's flood risk management responsibilities. So flood risk management has an important role in strategic planning, as I said, and there are two relevant policies on our local plan. S6, which covers the need for new development proposals to take account of likely climate change impacts, such as increased flood risk, temperature and wind changes. And then policy EN4, which seeks to direct development to lower risk areas and controls the type of development and adaptation measures required in higher risk areas. Obviously, the illustrations there show Newton Abbot with many of our local plan sites in Newton Abbot and the regeneration of the town centre, Bradley Lane, etc. And obviously, where it's situated in the flood zone will impact on options and design, but also enable improvements to be made as well. So opportunities as well as risks. Okay, next slide. Cambridge District Council has a number of drainage and flood risk assets of its own which need to be maintained. Examples like Ogwell Dam and the Coombe Valley Dam in Teignmouth. Recent larger projects have been the drainage improvements at Bakers Park related to the pavilion, which is the top right picture there. The top left picture is at Matford, so works that were taking place at Matford Sands. The bottom left picture is Ogwell Dam and the bottom right is Decoy Park. And Teignbridge also provides services to South Hams District Council, providing them advice in relation to planning applications for which we receive an income from them. Okay, thank you. The council obviously has a role also in responding to flood and storm events. The last major one was Storm Dennis, February last year. Just some information and stats there on the council's response. So as well as the immediate response, there is then the repair and damage to assets, and the response to repairing those, is over many years and still some work to go. You'll know of the overtopping of Holbein Dam as well, but that did its job basically and slowed down the flow of water, which is exactly what it's supposed to do. And obviously the Garden Communities money will be looking at that whole catchment, the Lemon and Team, to see how we manage future flood risk towards Newton Abbot. Next slide. Shoreline Management Plan. So this flow diagram shows how the plan fits in with the National Planning for Flooding and more local engineering and planning strategies. The strategy is carried out by the South Devon and Dorset Coastal Group, which Teignbridge District hosts. The plan has just been refreshed, which is just a sort of health check of the policies. Okay, thank you. Coastal management. So external funds have been obtained to fund the production of a Teignmouth and Holcombe Beach management plan, and this will provide the evidence base for flood and coastal capital schemes, and importantly assess the impacts and interactions with programmed and ongoing operations of work such as the Network Rail Resilience Programme. Teignbridge, next slide. Yeah, just on to the Exmouth Marina dredging, which obviously is a current and controversial topic. Teignbridge has challenged and continues to challenge the licence that the Marine Management Organisation have awarded to Exmouth Marina to dispose of their dredged material. The new licence was awarded following the suspension of their original licence for disposal, which was nearer to the shore and resulted in black sludge washing ashore. The new site, 7 kilometres offshore, is still controversial, and we've had several written and verbal communications with the MMO, and including our MP. Graham Smith, who is our coastal officer, and I have, and other affected stakeholders have met twice with the Marine Management Organisation to voice our concerns. Those concerns are particularly relate to the inadequate sampling of the dredge material and inadequate modelling of the impacts of the current disposal site. Other organisations, for example Exeter University, have now offered to do further modelling, and the MMO have confirmed that they will take on board the results of any additional modelling. So just to say, this is ongoing. We have submitted a complaint, we've had a response to that complaint, and since then we've met twice with them, with other stakeholders. So this is ongoing, and I hope the MMO will take account of any further modelling that is done on the disposal at the new site. Okay, thank you. Network Rail Southwest Resilience Project, which obviously has various different components to it, which are listed there. Hopefully most of you are familiar with this, but obviously this is resilience for a major sustainable transport route, not only of highly relevance to our district, but also carrying on into the rest of Devon and Cornwall. The Marine Parade and Boat Cove sections are nearing completion. The more northern Dawlish section, which includes work on the seawall and Dawlish station itself, is underway at the moment. I think we all know that. The Teignmouth-Holcombe section, which you'll be aware went through a process of extensive public consultation, is the responses are now being considered by Network Rail with revisions to the scheme design expected. Then the remaining section is the tunnels and cliffs section between Dawlish and Holcombe, and a prior approval application is expected for that section soon. Thank you. Back to the Southwest Coastal Monitoring Programme. This infographic really is just outlining some statistics relating to the successes of the programme this year. So, for example, just picking out some, there were 267 topographic surveys undertaken with 13 wave buoys, which operate 24/7 and support 27 different local authorities and the Environment Agency with incident response and scheme development. But that's a very important monitoring programme. Okay, thank you. This is the last slide. Just looking at some of the budget and funding opportunities. So these are bids that we put in or other funding that will need to be found, e.g. for maintenance of pumping stations, etc. So just this January, we put in a bid to the Environment Agency Innovation Resilience Fund. That includes projects, for example, at Cooman Teenhead for natural flood risk management, and a Newton Abbot strategic flood risk assessment, which is looking at wider aspects of flood risk management, also looking at natural processes. So that's what I mentioned before, the Lemon and the Teen, looking at how natural processes can be used. Also a coastal bid for a new education visitor and coastal management centre at Dawlish Warren Nature Reserve. There's a whole list here of funding bids we've put in, also for Teignmouth, Coombe Valley Dam, King Stainton, a long list here of funding opportunities and bids we've put in. Okay, thank you. I think that's it. I mean, there's a lot more information that I have here, but I'm conscious of time, and perhaps if people, you know, particularly want to know a bit more about anything, they can ask a question on it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jackie, for that. So we've got any? Got Mike Hockin, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Very interesting. Thank you for the presentation. Very interested, as any Newton Abbot town councillor would be, and in fact any Newton Abbot resident would be, is the Holmbeam Dam. I've been asking for quite some time over the last few years about about actually upgrading that dam. It's obviously, when it was built, and you're quite right, it has done a wonderful job. But I believe it has come to the stage now where it needs to be upgraded. It is, as you said, it has been overtopped. So that must be a warning to us to actually either higher the dam or to try and do something a bit further upstream to try and cut down the flow that's coming down the river. I noticed from the dam down towards the town centre, certainly through Bradley Woods and Bradley Meadows, and that a lot of the trees which have come down in the river, they've just been left. I've asked the question, I've never really got a full answer back from it. Is this being done intentionally by the Environment Agency to actually slow the water flow down and allow it to flood the flood the meadows, that's Bradley Meadows, or not. I think if at all, Jackie, whether it be at all possible, I think the actual town council would benefit from an update on what is happening. This is an important flood prevention issue for Newton Abbot, and I think the more we can know about this and the more we can do about the Holbein Dam, the better. It does worry us that there is obviously a lot of development going on around that area above the Holbein Dam, and I'm talking about Hill Park, Houghton Barton, etc. And all this water, I appreciate there's catchment areas and that being set up, etc., within the development. But all this water eventually will find its way down into the Lemon, and the Lemon is the main river that runs through Newton Abbot. The Tean is on the outskirts, but the actual Lemon runs through it. So for me, I am very concerned about the fact the Holbein Dam overtopped, and I would like to be assured that everything possible is being done to make sure that dam is suitable for the next 100 years. Thank you.
Did you want me to answer?
Jackie, if you could, Jeff, that'd be great.
Yeah, okay. I mean, obviously, we all share the concern, but yeah, so there's a couple of funded studies at the moment looking into the River Lemon and Tean Catch. I'll ask Richard to comment, but yeah, as I say, the Holbein Dam, that is its job, and it's performed well, and as well as that sort of conventional flood management tool of a dam, there are these other options that are being looked at as well. But maybe Richard, if you'd like to comment.
Yes, so Holbein Dam, so like any dam, they're designed to overflow. So there's been lots of studies been undertaken, and there's recent modelling studies been undertaken in Newton Abbot to look at the performance of Holbein Dam, how it operates, and currently it shows it is working and does provide the level of protection required to Newton Abbot. So Holbein Dam was designed to restrict flows coming through the town centre, and the recent modelling activity looks at how the system operates. There's a better understanding of how the walls and culverts that operate through the town centre. So Holbein Dam, its performance is there. The dams are designed to overtop, so that overtopping the dam, it is designed to overtop. So it was designed to restrict flow to a certain quantity through the town centre. So that did that in February, and it showed the defences. There was still capacity left in the defences through the town centre. So Holbein in itself is working at this design standard. There's work ongoing at the moment to look at how sort of resilience in terms of climate change and future changes in the catchment can be done, particularly upstream of Holbein Dam. So how those developments, parcels coming forward, how their surface water is dealt with. Obviously those sort of hill park areas do drain to Holbein Dam. So currently those areas have been classified as critical drainage area to manage those sort of surface water inputs into the Lemon. So there is lots of studies going on at the moment. The SFRA we're proposing for the garden communities will support that work to see what's the art of the possible. Currently the defences in Newton Abbot are shown to be performing, and we gave a presentation to the town council prior to COVID on that sort of work, and agree, yeah, we would definitely come back to the town council there to give an update on sort of Holbein, and particularly give you an update on how that performance is, and how it responded during that winter period. Regarding the trees left in the Lemon, so there's sort of a double-sided to trees left in the Lemon. So trees are normally removed where they are causing a flood risk issue to property. So at Bakers Park, where trees are landed against the tree catcher they're actively removed, or where trees are tangled up in infrastructure such as pipe crossings across the Lemon. Upstream of Bakers Park, where they fall down into the woods, actually they provide a benefit in terms of directing flows back into the floodplain. So where areas there, the woody debris within the watercourse can actually establish storage within the floodplain, which might not necessarily get activated during flood conditions. So it is a toss-up between where it's necessary in terms of flood risk, but where we can leave them in, they do actually provide a flood risk benefit and also an ecological benefit to the channel, particularly where you've got habitats around, having pools of water for fisheries and different types of habitats. So they are removed where they cause a flood risk issue, but where they're not actually causing an issue and where they actually they're actually a benefit to flood risk, they're generally left in the channel.
Yeah, thank you for that. Mr. Chairman, I am going to leave the meeting now, but thank you for that explanation and look forward to an update at Town Council in some future day. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor David Cox, please.
Thanks very much. Thank you very much indeed. I'm really pleased with that we're taking the dumping of the Exmouth Marina sludge seriously involving Exeter University. We do need robust testing, and we need someone with credibility doing that testing. So I'm really pleased that that's happening, and I certainly congratulate Councillor Hook. God knows when she has time to breathe with all the initiatives she's doing. Most welcome. So if we could have a little bit more about what's going on with the dumping, that would be helpful to share with Teignmouth residents about that, because it is of great concern. It's also, of course, great concern to Torbay Borough Council as well. So I do thank her for that, and Graham Smith for the work they're doing on that. And yeah, if we can have a bit more information, that would be fantastic.
Yeah, that's fine. I'll put an update together. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Councillor John Nutley, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Jackie, for a very excellent presentation. And I'm pleased, obviously, that electric charging points has been mentioned, because I know on our car parking review group we've been discussing this and obviously looking for costings of for installation of these, and also what the revenue could be got from them. I know you can actually lease these in from various firms. So, I mean, as I say, excellent news on that. Obviously, on Friday, last Friday, Dartmoor National Park and Alex Gandy, we actually had a discussion, you may well be aware of this, I don't know, on actually the carbon emissions, etc., and the Devon carbon plan, where the authority, its ambition is to become carbon neutral in its operation by 2025. The other thing also that the achieving the zero Devon plan, the draft carbon plan set out a roadmap for Devon to achieve net zero carbon by 2050 at the latest, with the interim target of 50% reduction by 2030 below 2010 levels. The reason for this timetable is that reducing emissions is not something that can be achieved in local, as I say, I don't know whether William do at all, liaise with Alex at all and have any correspondence that way, which, working across parties and authorities, I think is an excellent idea. But yeah, I mean, to say more than welcome for this report and presentation. And could the actual slides be forwarded to council so we could look at our, pass them on to our groups and that? Obviously, you're well aware of the ACE in Ashburton, but obviously for other councils and parish councils as well. So that'd be good if you could do that, please.
I can't imagine that's a problem, and there are, as I say, a whole set of detailed notes behind those slides as well, and I should think we can let members have those as well. Just to say on the Devon carbon plan, obviously they are seeking for views on the target they've currently set of 2050, so they are seeking views. My views would be, I'm sure similar to others, that it needs to be a lot sooner than that. Our district has a target of 2025 and most other districts have a target of 2030. So, please do put those comments in.
Thank you. Councillor Chris Jenks, please.
Yeah, hi Jackie, and thank you for that. That was really informative. It's nice to see there's so much going on. But with all that's going on, I'm guessing that Teignbridge itself, as the goal is for the entire district, I'm guessing Teignbridge has a very good working relationship with the key players that are within the private sector, because Teambridge isn't going to achieve this on its own. And I'm sure there's one out there, I just haven't seen it. But is there a timetable put into place with the achievable deliverables, and what those deliverables will translate to in terms of carbon reductions by 2025 to achieve that target? I was just wondering if you could direct me toward one.
Are you talking for the district as a whole now? I think you are, aren't you?
I am talking as the district
Yeah.
as a whole, yeah, because obviously with the private sector and Teambridge, there's a lot of work going on, but I'm guessing there's a timetable in place with, we need this project delivered by this time, because this project's going to reduce the emissions by this much to go towards our end goal of what this would be in 2025. And I'm sure that there must be one that's been drawn up, because obviously we've got a date. So I was just wondering.
Yeah, I mean that is what the carbon action plan will be for the council's own operation. So that's exactly as you've described it, what our carbon action plan will be, which hopefully will bring to executive in April. In terms of the district as a whole, that sort of work is probably under the Devon Carbon Plan. That's where that work is going on, and obviously we'll need to put that down to a Teambridge context. And of course, you know, it's the council will not be able to do it by itself, as you rightly say. That's why we have these really good relationship with Action on Climate in Teambridge. But I don't know if William is with us today, whether he just wanted to make any additional comments.
Jackie.
Yeah. Hi. Thank you, Jackie Hook. Yeah, so I'd just like to echo Jackie's comments there. So we are a partner of the Devon Climate Emergency Group. So this is a number of local authorities across Devon, as well as a number of institutional partners that are party to that organisation. So that project is ongoing, and there are clear deliverables that are set out in the Devon Carbon Plan. It's important that we don't duplicate this process. I think it's important also that we have a multi-authority approach, and to make sure that we bring everybody up to speed with one sort of united plan, if you like. We won't be able to meet net zero on our own. It will rely on other authorities, stakeholders, businesses, households to all sort of pull together at the same time. So the Devon Carbon Plan is currently out for consultation. It will continue to do so until February the 15th on Monday next week. So just encourage you to participate in that if you haven't already. Anything that's not included within the Devon Carbon Plan, and where we need a specific action for Teambridge itself, then we can look to implement that ourselves. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Adrian Patch, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Hook, for your presentation. I will have a look at the Devon Carbon Plan, and it's out for consultation. That sounds like a document worthy of having a look at. But I just wanted to ask whether either yourself or the Climate Change Officer or people at Devon, as far as you're aware, have a routine of checking and staying updated on the state of the science in terms of the changing climate, and in particular the sort of relative influence of natural forcing versus human influence forcing. I know it's a fast-moving area, and obviously the policies that we have in place are sort of sitting on top of the science. So I'm just interested really in how tightly that link between policy and the science is being monitored and maintained.
I don't know if William wants to come in a minute, but from my point of view, the way we operate is obviously we're operating within policies and legislation that comes down from a national context, and we have our own target of 2025, and we have above that the Devon Carbon Plan eventually, and then obviously various national legislation and parish climate agreements and this, that, and the other, and that is what will govern how we need to perform. And one can only hope that the science is taken into account when those policies and legislations are put into place. I suspect possibly they're not, and they're catching up all the time, and that's where public pressure comes in. But I don't know if William wanted to make any comments.
Yeah, so just further to Jackie's comments there. So the Devon Carbon Plan is really centred around the Committee on Climate Change, their net zero pathway. So within that, the science is sort of embedded within that, and it's based on both existing technologies that we understand and know how to operate presently, and also it'll rely to some extent on novel technologies that will come forwards. But that net zero pathway is continuously under review, and as new technologies, innovations, science becomes available, that pathway will become updated, and we can look to include that in any net zero pathways going forwards.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I think that's all the questions. I've got one, it's quite a minor question really. Is Teambridge as a council looking at converting vehicles into electric ones? Because I know Devon enforcement ones seem to be all electric now. I was wondering whether there was any plans for that. Thank you.
Yes, there are. I'll let William comment in detail, but yes, there are.
Yeah, so I have worked with officers from our fleet services departments. So yes, we are looking at electric vehicles, both from simply purchasing or hiring electric vehicles into our fleet. So physically getting the vehicles into our fleet, and also all of the infrastructure requirements that we require to support those. So currently we don't have a great deal of electrical supply capacities at our main sites where we store our vehicles. So Ford House, the multi-storey car park, and of course the depot. So as part of the Carbon Action Plan, we're looking at how we can increase the electrical supply capacities to those sites to enable the uptake of electric vehicles. We've done some preliminary research, and I sort of did a rule of thumb calculation on the amount of electrical capacity that we'd need to electrify the entire fleet, and it was something like 3 megawatts. So the equivalent of 3,000 homes, if you like, all connected at the same time. So clearly there's a lot of work that we need to do to understand what the network implications are, but we'll bring proposals together as part of the Carbon Action Plan, and aim to bring something to executive sometime around April this year.
Thank you very much for that. I think that's all the questions. Okay, thank you, Jackie and William, for that presentation. Very informative. Look forward to getting the rest of it sent through at a later date. Right, final item on the agenda, which is me. It's to consider forming a review group dealing with the climate and ecological emergency. I presume you've all seen the paperwork for it. I'm not going to go on too long. It would be to establish how town and parish councils, community groups and other public and voluntary organisations might better work with the district council to support the council's climate change agenda, with particular emphasis being given to ecology and biodiversity, and report back to the ONS Committee 1 on its findings, including potential funding opportunities and advice for town and parish councils and community groups and actions they might wish to take with support from the district council. I'd like to propose that. Will anyone second that, please?
Mr. Chair, I do have my hand raised.
Oh, sorry, didn't see that. Go on.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to comment on the document that's set out. The name of the group does reflect the climate and the ecological emergency in terms of a task and finishing group. But the terms of reference, though, make explicit reference to the council's climate change agenda, and then under part A, again, the climate change agenda. I wonder whether it might be appropriate to insert "and ecological emergency" in both instances. So, for instance, the first sentence of the terms of reference, as part of the promotion of the council's climate change and ecological emergency agenda, with the same repeated under point A. And I do note that there is a reference to sort of ecology and biodiversity, but I think it would make sense to include that under the terms of reference.
Yeah, don't see a problem with that at all. Yep, that's fine. I don't see an issue with that. Any other questions before we go forward? Okay, I'll propose it again. Could I have a seconder on that, please, if possible? Thank you, Adrian.
Chair, if I may, that's it's a proposal and seconding to include ecological emergency in the terms of reference.
Yes, it is. Yeah. Yes. It would be best to do a roll call on that, I think, wouldn't it? Or would it all hang?
No, just show of hands. I can't. Anyone's going to object to it.
Okay,
Yeah, show of
I
hands.
agree. It's gone on long enough, it says. I'll put my hand up.
Okay, so all those in favour, so that's 1, 2, 3. That's a unanimous, Chair. There's 8 members in attendance at the moment. Thank you.
Lovely. And for the membership, I propose that it's opened out to other councillors, unless we've got everyone on this group who'd want to. Because I know that there are other councillors with a quite strong interest in this subject that will be very keen to get involved with this. I'd like to propose that as a membership, if that's okay.
I'll second that, Chair.
Thank you very much. Could we have a hand show on that one?
Okay, thank you, Chair. That's unanimous. And can we also can you also vote on the maximum number of membership?
Maximum number would be 6. Oh, the other point is, sorry, I forgot about that. Jackie Hook, there was a bit of a, I'm not quite sure how that got on there. Executive member, Councillor Jackie Hook will not be a member. There'll be 6 members of non-executive people. Thank you. Fine.
Chair, I've got my hand raised again on this.
Yep, go on.
Just in terms of the numbers and setting a limit, and it does initially come under the remit of our group. So would it not be a good idea to see how many members of our group would like to be, of our committee would like to be members of this group, and then maybe set the maximum number accordingly? I mean, it would be a shame if, given that this falls under the work area of our group, if there was an outcome that people on our committee who wanted to be in that group weren't able to.
No, that wouldn't happen, Adrian. It would be initially our group, and then it would, if there weren't the numbers, it would be opened up to other people to make the numbers up.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that.
Okay, thank you.
Chair, if I may, just to clarify, any member can come along to any task and finish group meeting and attend. It's just obviously the core group is made up of the initial members.
Okay, so are we happy with that, with Adrian's?
Yeah, Chair. Chair, we just need to have a proposer and a seconder to for the number of the group being 6.
I'll propose 6.
Okay, seconded. Hands up.
Yeah, that's unanimous. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I think that is the end. Okay, thank you very much for your patience and time this morning or afternoon now. And see you at the next one. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chairman. Yep.